Google has dominated search for the past 2 decades, but things are changing and changing quickly. Who's going to come out on top? Well, that's anybody's guess, but it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So first of all, a time-based bulletin. Don't forget to watch out for the 33-engine static fire at SpaceX today. That is supposed to be happening sometime between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Central Time today. So whatever's going to happen, it's going to be exciting, but let's all cross our fingers that that is going to go well. I highly recommend watching Lab Padre, Mars Embassy, Boca Chica Gal, all the tank watchers. And anyway, I would maybe put up like 4 or 5 different tabs and watch them all simultaneously. But when that goes off, that should be a lot of fun. I have to teach most of the day, so I will probably actually miss it live, but of course, I will catch the replay when it happens. So anyway, huge congratulations to the SpaceX team for reaching this milestone, and here's to it going fantastically, because the next milestone should be a suborbital flight. Wow. Alrighty, and on to the main topic. So I'm going to take a little trip down history lane here first. I'm going to go back to when I first started using the internet, which was in 1983. Yes, at college. I went off to college and I would email my father. So I was at Princeton, he was at Cleveland State University. And yeah, the internet did exist then. It was actually developed from the DARPANET, in the 1970s. But it was primarily a university/research/military installations that were connected. And I think only in the United States, maybe a few sources outside the United States at the time. But anyway, you would go to a mainframe terminal, just a CRT screen, you'd type in something, press send, and it would literally go like connecting to Rutgers. And then it would say Rutgers connected, connecting to Columbia, Columbia connected, connecting to Cornell, Cornell connected, connecting to Ohio State connected, and then on to Cleveland State. So it was crazy. You could actually watch it send the email as it went. It was very, very slow and ponderous, but it was fantastic. So anyway, that existed for a long time. And then of course there were things like FTP protocol or file transfer protocol. So you could transfer files, and there were things like Archie and Gopher. But the big thing that happened in the 1994, if I'm remembering the year correctly, was the Mosaic web browser, and of course the development of the World Wide Web, which was a browser-based text and image smorgasbord. I remember downloading Mosaic from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I think it was their software. But anyway, I downloaded that, and it was very difficult to download. And then I opened up the browser, and I went and found a JPEG image of a flower or something. And, line at a time, it drew this thing in the browser for me, and my mind was completely blown. And I was like, this is the future. And at the time, there were a lot of people who said, this isn't the future. This is just a flash in the pan. No one is ever going to be interested in this. Who is right now? Anyway, but those people, they were kind of poo-pooing this and saying it wasn't going to go anywhere, but it developed incredibly rapidly, so that by the late 1990s, you had a plethora of websites, but how do you find them? There was no equivalent to the Yellow Pages. There were some early stabs at it like Ask Jeeves, and I believe Yahoo actually started as a search engine primarily. I can't remember, but they were not fantastic. So basically you had to have a friend who told you about whatever, URL you had to go to find it, because there was no good way of finding things. And this is the gap. This was the need that Google came in and filled in the late 1990s. And then during the dot-com bust, they managed to survive and actually grow while a lot of other companies disappeared. And by the early 2000s, 2002, 2003, there was just nobody but Google in terms of going to search. So search became Googling something, right? You wouldn't go, I'm going to go search for it on the internet. You'd say, I'm going to go Google that. And to this day, that's pretty much what people still say when they mean search. And when you have a lead like Google has had, you keep increasing your data, and you keep increasing your search results, and you keep increasing your market share lead, and it becomes next to impossible for anybody to try to catch up. And so that is the state of the art. And I would say a year ago, I certainly thought, and I think a lot of people thought, that for the foreseeable future, Google was going to dominate search, and the ad revenue that comes from that is ginormous. So it's where they make 60% of their profits right now already. And Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, recently, hint, hint, Microsoft is coming up here. He recently said that that is the most lucrative space to be in terms of advertising, is search results. So why does Microsoft matter? Well, they made a $1 billion investment in OpenAI a few years ago, which turned out to be a really, really good investment. And if you don't know, OpenAI, of course, were the people who wrote the original paper on transformers, which of course has completely changed the state of the art in terms of the way that neural networks worked. They've also produced DALL-E and DALL-E 2 and the CLIP text-to-image model, and that actually has powered the rest of the internet. They gave that one away for free, which actually OpenAI, I mean, that was originally their mission was to be open and to kind of open source this stuff. So at least they did that with CLIP, but I have a feeling that they kind of regret that now because that has been the major enabling factor that has allowed all sorts of things from Stable Diffusion to all sorts of language bots and other things to come about. So anyway, OpenAI has been at the core of this. And of course, you've also got other competitors like DeepMind that is now in bed with Google and, offerings from Facebook and Amazon, etc. But it really has been OpenAI that has been driving to the large extent, most of what has been going on, at least on the public front. And so they have been really, really at the top of the heap for this. And Microsoft just recently said they were going to put another $10 billion into OpenAI. So essentially, OpenAI has now become sort of a research and development wing for Microsoft, you might say. And they're certainly not, they're not following their mission as much as they used to. But, good on them. They're making incredible progress really, really quickly. And I think that they actually are, even though they're keeping a lot of these secrets, they're publishing enough information that people can figure out what they're doing, and they're germinating the world even though they're not directly putting things out. So this is great. And by the way, Andrej Karpathy yesterday said he was rejoining OpenAI. He was there before he went to Tesla. So that is fantastic news for Andrej and also fantastic news for OpenAI and for Microsoft and for all of us. So I think this is a win-win-win situation for everybody except maybe Tesla. They may be sad that they won't get Andrej back anytime soon. But anyway, congratulations to Andrej. And I certainly hope that things go well for you there and you help push the state of the art. And also, I know Andrej is very much about open sourcing things, so hopefully his influence will help OpenAI to tread that very careful tightrope between getting venture capital and becoming a profitable company, but also remaining to some extent open. So, we'll see how it goes. But anyway, that's a huge, huge move, and I'm really, really excited. So congratulations to Andrej. So, okay, we've got Google, which has basically dominated and grown their lead in search for the past 2 decades, at least outside of China. That's its own beastie because, of course, they have their whole data privacy things. But anyway, in the Western world, and especially the English and European language speaking world, Google is essentially search. It's synonymous for it. I think 90% of search is Google search. So that is a huge, nearly monopolistic rule over this. And ironically enough, they're being sued right now by the US Department of Justice for being too monopolistic, right at the moment where I think that they are not going to be a monopoly anymore. So it's kind of an ironic twist of fate that they're being sued right at this particular moment. The change that has happened is that Microsoft has taken OpenAI's very, very impressive and now famous ChatGPT, which was the fastest product to ever make it to 100 million users, like ever in history. They're taking that product and they've already integrated it into the Bing search engine and also into their Edge web browser. So what is this going to do? Well, the way that ChatGPT works for anybody who's used it for sort of search queries and stuff is you can type in things and say like, how can I get a recipe for the best chocolate chip cookies or something? And it might give you several recipes. It might even tell you these are the options. Which one do you want to see? And you can say, can you give me more details? Now, can you make it gluten-free or vegan-friendly or whatever, right? So you can do this as a chat-based thing rather than going to Google and typing in 10 best chocolate chip cookie recipes and then having to sort through things yourself. So it's a much more convenient interface. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be world changing in terms of the way that people interact with search. That's going to be a huge, huge outcome. And since Microsoft is basically the people who get to take OpenAI's intellectual property and commercialize it, what they've done is they've put it in their Bing search engine and then even more effectively in their Edge web browser. But basically what you get is you get a chat option. Unfortunately, right now, you can't access it without going on a wait list. So I put myself on the wait list last night, so fingers crossed I'll get into it relatively quickly. But basically on the main Bing page, when you click the chat tab at the top, it will bring up a chat interface rather than the traditional search interface. And that will give you access to a ChatGPT-like chat interface. But very, very critically, ChatGPT was cut off. The training data was cut off somewhere around mid-2021. So it's a couple of years out of date in terms of information right now. But as far as I understand it, I haven't been able to use it yet, but Bing is going to have that be connected to the internet so it can live go out and find information for you. So not just a chocolate chip cookie recipe, but breaking news about, SpaceX and Starship or something, right? It can go out and find that, and it can summarize that for you, or it can have a conversation with you about it. You can ask more details about things. You can ask it to expand on something. According to Satya Nadella in a recent talk, you can also get citations when you do this chat. That was another big thing with ChatGPT, is that you would type in stuff and you wouldn't really know whether it was true or not, and there was no way to go and search citations. But apparently that has been added as well. So you've got live search, which means it can actually access current internet data, and you also have citations, which is going to be absolutely huge. And then if you download the Edge web browser, rather than using like Chrome or Safari or something like that, if you download Edge, you also have access to ChatGPT functionality in a sidebar. Again, I don't have access to this yet because I'm still on the wait list, but apparently what you get is like a sidebar to the right. And you can then, like if you're looking at a research paper, let's say you go to archive.org and you look at a research paper about medicine or something, and you're like, well, okay, I'm probably not going to understand this. I don't want to spend 2 hours reading the whole thing. You can then ask it to summarize in one paragraph what's going on in this paper. It will do that. So that's an even more effective interface, which means, of course, that I had to download the developer's version. So as soon as I'm off the wait list, I can use it. So as you can probably tell from this is a new paradigm, a new way to not just search, but to sort of get answers, almost like you had like a Dr. Know-it-all or something like that right in a box. So you're like, hey, Bing, go find me this information and tell me about it. Don't make me go do the legwork. It's going to do the work for you, and that is a huge change. And if you think that Google didn't notice this, they had a code red, all hands on deck meeting late last year just because of this, because they saw the writing on the wall. They knew what was coming. So what has Google done, or are they doing about this? Well, an interesting problem that Google has is what's called the Innovator's Dilemma, which is that they became so dominant in a space, right? If you have 90% of all searches, you're just so dominant that you don't really want to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. You're like, okay, don't touch this thing. It's all good. We can experiment and do all this other crazy stuff because Google does that. They do all these crazy things on the side, but their main baby that provides most of their cash flow and their profits is something that they don't want to touch because they've become so dominant. But the problem is that always leaves you open to disruptive innovation from the outside. And certainly if you want to compare this to Tesla and Legacy Auto, you could see that exact same thing. Legacy Auto became very successful at building internal combustion vehicles. Tesla came along more than 10 years ago and said, hey, we're going to build electric vehicles and they're going to be amazing. And they were. And all Legacy Auto could have had to do was basically just step in and either buy Tesla at the time. They could have done that, or they could have competed starting right out of the gate in like 2013 or 2014 and crushed Tesla because it was still a tiny, tiny little car company. But they didn't, because they were like, oh, no, hold on to the profits. Don't do anything crazy. Don't rock the boat. All of that kind of stuff. You even saw that with GM's EV1 back in the late 1990s, is they built this vehicle, everybody loved it, and then GM took it back and crushed all the vehicles and destroyed them because they realized that they built something that was too good and they didn't want people to actually have access to it because they didn't want pressure on their internal combustion engine business. So in short, it's great to be a disruptor. It's also highly dangerous. It's a very risk-taking kind of thing, but it's not so great to be the person who's in the incumbent position because you're scared about losing the place that you already have. Now, of course, it's kind of funny to call Microsoft the challenger or the disruptor in this case, because, of course, they have been a giant since the 1980s. And actually, in the 1990s, they were so dominant that they were being sued by the Department of Justice for monopolistic behavior. So, things go in cycles. Microsoft made a couple of gigantic mistakes. In the 90s, they just completely missed the internet boat. And then in the mid-2000s, they completely missed the smartphone boat. So, they went from a place of almost 100% dominance to being one of the main players, but no longer the main player. And to Satya Nadella's credit, he has really, really guided Microsoft in a way. I didn't really like them 8 years ago in the mid-2000 teens. I was like, ugh, gosh, what a stupid company. They're just making Azure, and they're doing behind the scenes stuff and they're doing that well. But in terms of front-facing things, no good. But they have made huge, huge strides under his leadership in the last half decade to 8 years or so. But anyway, regardless of Microsoft as a whole company, in terms of search engine and everything, they are a baby. They're a challenger from the outside. So they have that ability to disrupt without having to worry about making any waves and disturbing what they already had as a profit center, because their primary profit center is things like Azure and Windows. So that's why Google's scared, and that's why they haven't done anything yet. What are they doing now? Well, they're releasing a product called Bard. I think it's already in developer preview, but I don't think you can put yourself on the wait list just yet. But anyway, that's coming out. That is their ChatGPT answer. Nobody at this point knows if it's going to be as good as the Bing version of ChatGPT. Everybody does know that it will be connected to the internet, so it will be able to do live searches. So it will be a competitive product, but it depends on how competitive and how quickly Google gets it out as to whether or not it will be able to compete and ultimately defeat Microsoft's Bing. And just to make this more fun, one of the huge things that Google has had for the past couple of decades is they have had the laziness factor on their part. In other words, when you buy a Mac, or especially when you get an Android or Apple phone, you have Google built in as the default search option. That's the thing that's there. Now, Windows is a little bit different, of course, because Microsoft is its own thing, and they put Bing as the default engine, which is probably one of the big reasons that they have 9% search results as opposed to like 1%. But anyway, that means when you get your new phone or you get your Mac or whatever, you just go onto the internet, right? Like my mom says, you type in something and you get results. You don't even realize that that's actually Google running in the background. And that's the way Google likes it. They pay a lot of money to keep things that way and to keep themselves on top. Which means that if Google can come out with a good enough competitor quickly enough, they'll just sort of default to being the option that people will use, and they'll just see this chat window pop up when they search, and they won't really understand whether it's Bing or Google or something else, and they will just go ahead and type in their chat, and they'll be like, oh cool, this works great. But something really clever that Microsoft is doing, and I found out this last night, is that when you put yourself on the wait list, you can actually bump your place up by making Bing your default search engine on your desktop web browser, downloading the Bing application on your iPhone or Android phone, and also downloading the developer version of the Edge web browser and using that as well. So that is what they're doing, is they're saying like, aha, we can move people from being lazy and just sort of accepting the default option to making us the option for search. And as it turns out, I'd been using Ecosia for years, which is Bing based, and it plants trees as you do searches and stuff. So I had already done that myself. But there's going to be a lot of people who want to get in on this and get in on it fast, who are going to switch from using Google as their primary search engine to using Bing as their primary search engine. And that is very clever. So if Google is slow, let's say they're like 3 or 4 months out from releasing Bard, I don't think it's going to take them that long. But let's just say it takes them that long, then Microsoft could eat the early adopters who are excited to get this new technology and want to do that into the early mainstream adopters. So again, S adoption curve, right? You've got the people going at the bottom, and this is happening really fast right now. So the bottom's fast and it's tipping up. And so I imagine a lot of people in the last 24 hours have already switched their default search engine from Google to Bing. And Microsoft is probably already seeing the results of that. They may be like, oh my gosh, look at this. Our search results have gone from 9% to 10% or 11% in the past 24 hours. So this could push them into a dominant position really fast. And that should utterly terrify Google, because if they lose that laziness default option thing and people just go with Bing, again, remember, a lot of people don't even understand what their search engine is. They just see a web browser, they type something in and they get an answer. And if that answer is better using Bing, they're going to just stick with it. They won't go back to Google to compare. So Microsoft is being really, really clever here and making a significant play very, very quickly to get a lot of Google search off of Google and onto them even before you get to the ChatGPT based interface that they're going to add on. So that's the two big heavyweights. Is there anybody else that might be waiting in the wings as well? Well, open source is still a possibility. Open Assistant looks like a really, really fantastic alternative to either of these, and that is going to be an interesting possibility. It is going to be really difficult for anybody but these giant companies to muscle their way in, however, at least outside of a niche market, because of the fact that this stuff is all kind of browser-based and it's, again, that laziness-based thing. You need to become the default engine, not something that people have to go out and seek to be able to get really large market share. So the odds are either Microsoft or Google is going to come out on top of this. And then the last thing to touch on here, and I don't have an answer to this, but it is something to keep an eye on, is the ethics and the ability of these computers to stay safe while they're scrambling. So Google and Microsoft are now in, a scrap, schoolyard scrap where they're just going at each other. And this is going to play out over the next 6 to 12 months or something. And it's going to be really interesting for us consumers to watch. But the danger is that somebody might go too far and try to get market share too fast without keeping some safety lids on the AI itself, on the models. And that could potentially lead to dangerous behaviors and dangerous situations. It's kind of terrifying to think about what might happen if this goes wrong. And I know you might be saying like, wait a second, I saw this episode that you just did the other day about how AI ethics could be killing AI creativity, but I did say it's walking a tightrope. So what I mean by this is you don't want to put too many biases and restrictions on your models, your large language models, or else they lose the potential to be creative and truly effective as helper agents. But at the same time, it can't be a free-for-all either, because then they're going to turn into something that I don't even know what they might turn into. It could be terrifying kind of stuff. If you've seen the Dan 5.0 jailbreaks and stuff, even what's going on with ChatGPT is pretty scary. And so, if you see something like that could happen with these two companies because they're battling it out and they're like, have to release version 1.2, have to release version 1.3, have to release version 1.4, and they're scrambling madly, there could be a breakdown of the controls that are in place because they're so worried about either gaining or losing market share. So that's a potentially really interesting side thing to keep an eye on. But this battle this year, get out the popcorn, watch what's going to happen. It is certainly going to be interesting. I don't honestly know which of these two behemoths is going to beat the other one, and maybe we'll end up with 50-50 by the end, which means that Google ultimately is lost. Certainly Google is in a substantially worse situation. Again, the Innovator's Dilemma, they currently have 90% of search results. So even if they end up at the end of this with 80% of search results, they have still lost 10%. So odds are that Google is going to lose in some sense and Microsoft is going to gain in some sense, but it's just a question of how it's going to rebalance when they get done. In any case, it's going to be super interesting, so keep an eye out for all this in 2023. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking and really exciting. I find this all very exciting. Anyway, if you did, please do like it so other people can find it, because Google's, YouTube's search algorithm uses that to determine how to feed out this stuff to other people. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. We're almost at 50,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much for that. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much for your support. I truly do appreciate it. You all make this worthwhile and, get me out of bed in the morning to make these videos. So thank you so much. And of course, if you want to join the team, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have Tesla Bot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.